Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Now this week it's time to get emotionally invested in animals and inanimate objects as we take a look at the world of Pixar. Now I'm a big fan of the poker tuber Lockstin and Noggin. And what he does in a lot of his videos is he takes a franchise, usually another gaming franchise, and he'll give the characters Pokémon types. Now I really love these videos and I'll link them up in the cards and down below as well if you're interested in taking a look at them. But I thought that I would quite like to give this idea a go, and I thought where better to start, especially with my channel, than with Pixar characters. Now often Pixar characters lend themselves really well to being Pokémon, quite often they're animals or magical creatures to begin with, and I think because of that they just sort of make sense for this idea. Now to start off with a few housekeeping rules. Now this is a Pixar list, so I won't be including any of the sort of pure Disney properties. That means no Frozen, no Moana and no Big Hero 6 as the most notable ones. However, I will be switching Wreck-It Ralph with Brave because I think Brave fits the Disney sort of theme a little bit better and Wreck-It Ralph fits Pixar a little bit better. If I do a Disney video down the line, Brave will be included in that. Also, I won't be including Soul here because I haven't actually seen it yet and I think it'd be unfair to sort of give them sort of judge their characters when I haven't seen the film. On top of that, these are just my opinions. Some of them I don't think there's much to say about them, so I might rush by a few of them, and others I'll focus a little bit more on, particularly the characters that have a bit more to say about them. Also, if you disagree with any of my opinions, feel free to let me know down below. I'd love to hear what you think about any of this. And also while you're down there, don't forget to like and subscribe as well. Now, let's kick off, shall we? So starting off with Finding Dory, and I think Marlin and Dory, as well as most of the other characters of this franchise, are water types. I know it's a bit obvious, but what else could you do with them really? A few of them could have poison types, maybe some of the jellyfish, maybe Crash could be part psychic, or maybe Bruce could be part dark type. But I think overall water is definitely going to be a big theme there. And on that note as well, A Bug's Life, the entire cast are almost definitely bug type. A few of them might be bug flying, a few of them might be bug poison, similarly to the Finding Nemo cast, but they're bug types. Another fairly straightforward franchise is the Cars ones, and I think this is easy because I think most of them are steel type. Maybe electric cars could be steel electric, and Lightning McQueen could fall into that category as well, seeing as he's Lightning McQueen. Also Mater would probably be sort of steel ground type, and on that note as well, any of the characters from Planes would probably be steel flying too. I think that this one's pretty cut and dry, just like the two before it. Now, Toy Story is a little bit more interesting, mostly because there's sort of two facets to life within these films. Do you take the characters as the toys that they are themselves, or kind of what the toys represent? I think that that ultimately is the more interesting way to go about things, so for the purposes of my video, Buzz is a space ranger, Woody is a cowboy, and that kind of stuff. So on that note, Buzz is probably a psychic flying type, flying for obvious reasons, and psychic is usually the de facto cosmic type in Pokemon. Also, Woody and Jessie would probably be fighting type because of their honour and their sort of moral code and that kind of thing, and of course they're good fighters, they're cowboys. On top of that, Rex would probably be a dragon type because all dinosaurs in Pokemon are dragon type. And then Slink would maybe be normal steel. He's a dog with a slinky aspect, that kind of makes sense for that. And then you go on to Bo Peep, who's a little bit more interesting. At the beginning, when she's just sort of her lamp, she'd be sort of a fairy or psychic. And then maybe when she's her Toy Story 4 form, maybe her evolved form or something like that, you might introduce the fighting type or the dark type, something along those lines to make it a bit more interesting. I feel like a lot of the other toys, like Mr. and Mrs. Potato Head, Ham, Barbie, would probably be normal types. And then of course the annoying little aliens would be psychic type, to match Buzz with his sort of cosmic aspect. Now another couple of quick ones. From The Good Dinosaur, Arlo would be a dragon type for the same reason that Rex is, and then Spot would probably be a normal type, maybe with fighting in there somewhere. Keeping on the theme of quickfire ones, we go to Inside Out now, and I think Riley is a normal type. I think that this is actually perfect for her, not because she's boring, but because she's supposed to be a sort of everyman, or every woman, I suppose. She's supposed to be the person that you can sort of see yourself in, that you can see all of her flaws as your flaws and that kind of thing, and because of that, normal type suits her really well. And then of course, all the emotions inside would be psychic type. What else could they be? Now it's on to the Incredibles, and the Incredibles really were the main inspiration for doing this video. They're the sort of obvious ones to give Pokemon types because they actually have powers. Now, starting off with the patriarch of the family, Mr. Incredible, and I think that he would be obviously a fighting type. However, I think he also could have a secondary type of maybe rock or steel. Even though he's not made out of either of those things, him being so tough and sort of having such high endurance could be a good justification for that. It's been done a few times in Pokemon, and I think it could be done here as well. And then on to his wife Elastigirl, and I think that actually she would probably be a dark type, mostly because of her stealth and espionage skills. But maybe she'd be a sort of normal dark type, because that makes her seem a little bit less evil. Then we move on to their kids. You've got Violet, who would be a psychic type and probably behave a little bit like Mr. Mime, have a lot of barriers, a lot of stalling techniques and that kind of thing. Dash would probably be, I mean, he's quite a difficult one, really. I would probably say electric type just because usually faster Pokemon are electric types, even though he doesn't actually have any electric powers. But there's not really a speed type or a sonic type that might work for him. So, I mean, you could maybe say he's a normal type or a ground type maybe because he runs on the ground or something like that. Maybe even a flying type because I guess he could pick up some wind as he runs. But I think it's got to be electric type. Then we've got Jack, who I think because of his sort of variety of powers, he would definitely be something powerful, like a fairy type, maybe a psychic. However, I definitely think he'd have a secondary type that changes based on the different forms that he might take. When he's the sort of flaming ball of baby, he would be part fire type as well, and that kind of thing. Then on to a couple of more honourable mentions from the Incredibles. I think Frozone would obviously be an ice type, and then everybody's favourite villain, Syndrome, would probably be something along the lines of electric psychic, maybe electric steel, something along those lines. Something to show that he's a sort of industrialist in some way. I think electric steel is pretty good, but I think electric psychic probably represents his powers a little bit better. Now once again onto a few more quickfire ones, and starting with Ratatouille, I think both Remy and Linguini and probably most of the characters in this film would be normal types. You could argue maybe that Remy could have a part psychic type because he can control Linguini, but that's literally physically controlling him. Maybe he'd have a few psychic powers, psychic type moves or something like that. And then we move on to Up, and again, most of these would be normal types, Callum Russell in particular. Maybe they could have a flying form or something to represent the house or something like that. And then you got Kevin and Doug, which again, because they're just sort of regular animals kind of, they would be normal type too. Maybe Kevin could be part flying type because most birds are, even if they can't actually fly, and that would work pretty well. I mean, Kevin's kind of a colourful version of Dodrio, except without 3 heads and that kind of stuff. And then Doug could maybe be part electric type or part psychic because of the translator and that kind of stuff. There's some weird things going on there. However, I think normal type would be fine as well. Next on to Coco, which was another slightly difficult one, but only because I've only seen this film once, and when I did see it, I think I might have fallen asleep in it. Sorry to any Coco fans out there. That being said, I think Miguel is a normal type, maybe dark or psychic because of his connection to the undead world. And then Ernesto would be a ghost type. Maybe with the normal typing in there as well, mostly because there's no sound or sonic type to represent that. And normally, normal does the job of that. Take Loudred or Clefairy, for example. Well, Clefairy, before Clefairy became a fairy. On top of that, there's also Meloetta, who has normal connections as well, and that kind of thing, and I think that this would suit really well. Now onto a surprisingly tricky one, and that's Monsters Inc. and Monsters University. Now, I'm only going to take Mike and Sully as examples, but I think that the reason why this was so difficult is because, yeah, they're monsters, and you'd have thought that that would be pretty easy for Pokemon, what with it being pocket monsters originally, but there's no sort of distinct typing that they could possibly be. Ultimately, though, I went with Dark Fairy. Now, the reason why I did this is because in the Monsters Inc. universe, they are literally employed to scare people, which is quite a dark thing, but they are quite friendly and benevolent monsters. And so because of that, there's quite a few contradictions in their character. I think arguably Mike is slightly less dark than Sully. Maybe he's just a straight up fairy type and Sully's a dark fairy because he's the actual scarer. But I think ultimately there's got to be some sort of fairy connection for sure, with a lot of dark moves at very least. Next up is Onward, and I had a little bit more fun with this one. Now I think first of all you've got to take the fact that they're elves out of the equation. I'm not just going to make all of the cast fairy type because that would be boring. So on that respect, I think that Ian would probably be a sort of normal psychic. He starts off as a fairly normal teenager, but then obviously develops magical powers. I think then both Ian's mum and his brother Barley would become a normal fighting type, mostly because of their protective spirit more than anything else. Also, of course, Barley has this sort of adventurer's sort of ideology and that kind of thing, and fighting makes perfect sense. On top of that, we have, of course, the Manticore, which would probably be Dragon Fire. I mean, what else could it be? Maybe Poison type instead of Fire? Perhaps there'd just be a lot of Poison type moves or something like that because of the part Scorpion aspect of the physiology. But I think, ultimately, Dragon Fire makes the most sense. Maybe just straight up Dragon, actually. Last up for the films I'm covering in this video is Wreck-It Ralph. Now I think pretty much every character in Wreck-It Ralph would probably be electric type, at least as their primary type, because obviously they're video game sprites, it just kind of makes sense. They're sort of generated by electricity, and that makes perfect sense for their Pokédex entries. It would just be with the secondary types that make them more interesting. I think Vanellope would probably have a secondary type of Psychic, or maybe Dark or something like that. You could say Fairy because of her Candy Crush vibes you almost get from her, but her as a character isn't particularly fairy-like. I think Dark makes a lot of sense, and so does Psychic. And then Ralph himself, of course, would probably be electric fighting, for pretty obvious reasons. You could argue Dark, but that's just his sort of in-game persona. It's not his personality, even in the slightest. And fighting just works really well to represent that as well as his sort of nobler spirit. So there we go, that's everyone that I'm going to be covering in this video. Now obviously this has barely even scratched the surface, there's a lot more characters from these films alone that I haven't even covered, not to mention all of the Disney films and that kind of stuff that I could also get onto if I wanted to. Let me know down below who you think I've missed out, who the biggest notable people I've missed from these franchises are, and if I've got any of the people who I have covered wrong in any way. Don't forget to let me know anything that I could do differently, and of course don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel if you're new around here. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.